You're listening to the Becoming More Me podcast with me, Teresa Lear Levine. You're already enough. But if you're anything like me, you thrive when you're stretching and developing yourself, creating more of the person you feel called to be. This podcast is here to inspire and support you. Let's release the negative, reinforce the positive, and elevate our vibe together as we tap into our limitless potential to transform and grow. Hello, amazing listeners. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Becoming More Me. I am delighted to be bringing Tracy Taris to you today. Tracy is a licensed marriage and family therapist, speaker, and author of Many Voices, One Truth. She is also the president and owner of Healing the Mind and Spirit, Inc., where she leads a team of counselors. Her group practice is located in Santa Clarita Valley and provides psychotherapy services for couples, families, individuals, adolescents, and children, as well as coaching services that cover a variety of topics from creative blocks, nutritional problems, and women's issues. Tracy's service to her Santa Clarita community also includes being a part of a team that works as contract therapists for College of Canyons, Students' Health and Wellness Center. Tracy holds a master's degree in clinical psychology with an emphasis in marriage and family therapy from Azusa Pacific University. She also holds a bachelor's degree in journalism with an emphasis in broadcasting from California Polytechnic State University. And I am really excited to dive in with her here today and hear what she has to offer us on the Becoming More Me show. So welcome, Tracy.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. And I know you have lots of amazing credentials and this wide breadth of work that you've done, but can we start with just getting to know you a little bit? Can you tell us a little bit about, where you come from, maybe your upbringing and what's led you to this place where you are now?
Well, I hail from New Orleans, Louisiana. I grew up in the suburbs outside of New Orleans. My mom was a single mom. And we didn't really have any interaction with my dad at first. And then my dad reached out to me when I was about 26 years old. And I've been having a relationship with him ever since. I grew up Catholic, and now I'm Christian. I go to a non-denominational church. I grew up with 5 brothers and sisters, but discovered that I had 3 more, another sister and 2 brothers later on in my adult life. And so happy to say I have a relationship with them as well. And I am wife of Michael Taris. He's a musician, and we live here in the northern part of Los Angeles, California. And we have 2 daughters. Lexi, she's married to Patrick, and we have our first grandchild, Autumn.
Aww.
And then our youngest daughter, Jasmine, she just graduated from high school last year and is in college. And yeah.
Yeah, that definitely keeps you busy along with everything else that you're doing. And I'd love to start off kind of talking about your book a little bit. What inspired you to write it and get it out there for all of us to enjoy?
Well, I've always wanted to write, and I am a marriage and family therapist. And being a therapist, I've always wanted to write a book to help people with their cognitions, which is, how we think and the thoughts that run through our mind. But the event that inspired me to get to the task of writing it, one of my baby sisters had a stroke in her late 30s.
Wow.
And so the rest of us went out to help her. Like 4 of us were here in California. One was in Ohio, and one was in the sister that had a stroke was in Texas. And while I was there helping her, like we all were helping her in one way or another. But the way I was helping her was because I work in a social services field. I knew that she would need social services once she was out of the hospital, because I knew she would not be able to go back to work. So I just kind of dove in and rolled up my sleeves to try to put some things in place. And during the course of all that, I just kept feeling all of this anxiety and fear, and didn't really know where it was coming from. And so that anxiety and fear led me to want to go home, like come back home to California, to my husband and kids, where, I felt safe and there wasn't the threat of death. And I spoke with a friend of mine about all of this that I was going through. And she said, this has nothing to do with what's going on in Texas. It has everything to do with what you believe. And she reminded me of just an early struggle that I had in my early adulthood, where I thought I was going to die young because my mother had traced a line on my palm and said that I would die young. And so I believed it. But here I was in my early 40s, and I thought I had dealt with that belief. I thought that, I had gone to therapy. I had become, a devoted follower of Christ. I believe I followed Christ my whole life, but I become a devoted follower of Christ and, kind of dealt with all of those kinds of things. But my younger sister, having this brush with death, brought that belief up. I had gone to therapy and thought I had changed it, but I had only healed it a little bit. So some of it were still in my subconscious mind and my unconscious mind. And her brush with, the stroke and whatnot brought up that belief. And so it really forced me to think, what do I believe? And how deep does this belief run? Because consciously, I no longer believed I would die young. But her experience and my experience in helping her helped me to realize, oh, that's still in there. And it made me think about so many clients who, they come in and they're coming in for relationship issues. They're coming in for depression, anxiety, and self-esteem issues, and how we work through their belief systems and find out that it runs deeper than what they thought it ran. So the reason I wrote the book ended up being to help people understand, their thought processes and get in touch with what they are thinking and change those thoughts in the moment.
I love that. How is your sister doing now?
Oh, she's great. Yeah. Yeah, she's great.
That's awesome. I'm sure she was really grateful to have your help and didn't even realize that her struggle was going to help you.
Yeah, for
Beautiful
sure.
how that works, isn't it?
Yeah.
You talk about your faith, and I too, I was raised Catholic, and I spent some time with Judaism and Buddhism and a bunch of different things, and now I've come to a more place of just spirituality and just having this awe and respect for all of it and all the different ways that people enjoy faith. So, for someone who isn't Christian, what do you hope for them to get out of your message and your book?
Understanding the truth of who they are, that they are wonderfully and beautifully made, and that the thoughts that run through their mind do not have to drive the rest of their lives. The thoughts do not have to drive their choices and their behaviors, their view of themselves, and their view of their families and relationships. Because many of the problems we have in our life, whether it's relationally, whether it's in our career, whether it's what's going on with ourselves, they initiate in the thought life.
Sure.
And so, like many of the faith systems that you mentioned, and I think all faith systems have a thought component. Like, what are the things that I'm thinking about, and how do I purify my thoughts? How do I purify my heart and my spirit so that I can be who I was created to be, who I am intended to be?
Yeah, I love that. That's wonderful. Um, yeah, so in the book, I know you use this analogy about broadcast networks and voices. What brought you to that, and how does that fit into this whole thing?
The process of we in the psychology field, some of us therapists and psychologists, we use a form of therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy. And cognitive, like as I mentioned before, has to do with your cognitions and how you're thinking. And then behavior is the behavior that you're choosing as a result of what you're thinking. And so I realized that there's lots of different things that people can think in treating people with cognitive behavioral therapy. Like an event will happen. Like I always start off explaining that there's nothing on the outside of you that can make you feel or choose anything, but it's what you're thinking of what's going on the outside of you. And the gist of CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, the gist of CBT is recognizing what your thoughts are in relation to the event that has happened. And then how do you choose either the truth or how do you choose an alternate thought? Something else that is true, because sometimes the things that happen to us and what we think about it, they are true, but what else can you think about it? And so it made me think of growing up. We only had four broadcast networks: ABC, CBS, NBC, and PBS. There was cable, but we didn't have cable. We only had those four to choose from. So I use that analogy in the book for the broadcast networks that most people are listening to. And a lot of the people that come to me are Christian people or people of different faiths. And so the analogy that I used are self, Satan, society, and savior. And I teach people using CBT and prayer practices, silence practices, reflective practices, how to tune down the voices that are not edifying to your spirit,
Yeah.
and how to turn up the voices that are. And self and society, can be either negative or positive. So just differentiating, what's coming from each of the different voices, whereas the other two voices can either be negative or positive, you know.
Awesome. And how do you, I know you do a lot with marriage and family type stuff and relationships. So how do you apply all of that, like when you're working with someone on their marriage?
It depends on the couple, and it depends on what they are coming in with. But initially, I will get a history background. How did each person grow up? Like, how did their parents interact with each other? Did their parents interact with each other? How did their parents navigate their marriage or their relationship? And are they still together? And so then I help them identify, what did you learn, whether consciously or unconsciously? And I help them identify some of the subconscious things that they learned and took away from their parents. What did you learn from their relationship that you want to keep? Because no matter, the experience, usually there is something that you want to keep, whether it's a strong work ethic, whether it's communication, whatever, and what in their relationship that you find is operating in yours, whether consciously or unconsciously, that you want to get rid of, because you don't have to keep patterns that are harming your relationship and harming yourself within yourself, outside of the relationship.
Yeah, just to make a new choice, create a new thought,
Making the choice.
everything. And so what are some of your some of things that you personally like to do, or your favorite practices to get into a frame of mind for that like thought examination so that you can create that growth?
I outlined a lot of them in the book. I used to go on these prayer retreats where I would just spend the weekend in silence. It would be with other, therapists and psychologists and whatnot. And, we live in California, so it's really beautiful here. Like, we're really spoiled with weather and, being able to be outdoors pretty much all year round, even in winter. Those of us who are not living in the mountains where the snow is. But some of the prayer practices and silence and meditative practices that I like are, one's called centering prayer. And it's a form of meditation where you choose a word or phrase and you keep your mind. You start with the breath, and then you move from the breath to a word or phrase that keeps you centered. And then you consent to the presence of Christ and to his work in your life. And you allow whatever needs to heal or whatever needs that's troubling you to surface. And then you just give it over, you release. That's one of them. Another one is, I call it remembrance. And I actually get that from when the priest would say, do this in remembrance of me. And it's what it does in a nutshell is, you think of something, you remember something that is good, that is edifying, that is true. And it could be a moment in time. It could be something that you've experienced, and then you bring your five senses into that experience so that you re-experience it all over again. And when you're doing any of these two practices, or any of the practices outlined in the book, what you're doing is you're reshaping your neural pathways.
Mm-hmm.
You're reshaping what's going on in your brain and what is driving you. Like when you run into a person or interact with a person that seems to be pretty lighthearted and positive and happy most of the time, and then you interact with a person that seems to be pretty grumpy and ill-tempered or ill at ease most of the time, what you like, we think that's just personality and just temperament. And some of us are born with one temperament or the other, but whether you were born with that a more at ease temperament or not, it's something that you can cultivate, because when you interact with these people, the two people that I just mentioned, what you're interacting with is how their brain is wired and restructured. And what meditation and meditative practices will do is rewire your brain to experience, not just experience more calm and peace, but to help you be more calm and peaceful. I was doing this meditation by the Dalai Lama. It came up on my phone at the beginning of the year, and it was like 10 free days of meditating. And a lot of what he talked about was being warm-hearted, cultivating warm-heartedness. And so I did the practice for like 10 days. And at the end of it, I did feel that, like I did feel, more at peace. And but it's the thing about meditation is you have to practice it every day in order for you to feel the effects of the peace that it can bring.
We've talked about that a lot on the show, especially since I have ADHD, and so do a lot of my listeners. And sometimes it can really feel like a nemesis to try to meditate. And there's a lot of feelings of like, oh, I suck at this, or like I just can't do it right, because it's so hard to quiet that monkey mind. But I still do it, and I've gotten better over the years. And that's probably why I enjoy EFT tapping. I'm a master practitioner at that, because it's active meditation, and I don't feel like I'm doing it wrong because I get to do something while I'm getting the things out of my head. But, you mentioned in one of those practices about, release, about handing it over. I always love to get different people's perspective on like how to let go, because I think that's something that we all have such trouble with. Like, it sounds so good in theory, like just hand it over. But is there anything in that you feel is like an action step, or that makes that a little easier? Because I think sometimes people have a hard time letting go of their things or handing it over to a higher power and releasing, surrendering, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. There's lots of different things that you can do. You can use your imagination, where you picture yourself handing it to someone that's, either older or wiser. It could be someone that, like your grandmother who has passed on. When I do it, I picture myself handing it over to Christ and just letting him do what he needs to do with it. I once had a therapist who had an office that the back end of the office, the back window of the office was a big open field. And she would have her clients write down worries and put them on like these little hand-sized footballs and then toss them out the window.
Oh, I
And
love
so
that.
like, every couple of weeks, she'd have to go out there and gather up all these footballs that were sitting. I've heard of people writing things on slips of paper and either burying them or writing things on slips of paper and burning them. I've heard of people writing things on slips of paper and carrying it around as a tangible form of the worry. And then when you're ready, and I've had my clients do this, like, well, when you're ready, throw it away, tear it up and throw it away, burn it, get rid of it. And a lot of times people will carry things around like for a few weeks, but knowing that they have a tangible form of it helps it not sit in their hearts and sit in their minds, and then they throw it away. So there's so many different things that you can do to release, and as a metaphor for letting go of it, making it tangible is one of the biggest.
Yeah. I love all of those ideas, and I love the idea of making it tangible. I often do that with, are you familiar with like the Sedona method? No, it's the idea there is that you think of the burden or whatever it is that you're carrying around as a physical, tangible thing, and give it like a weight or a description. Maybe it's like a knapsack full of rocks or something, and it's weighing you down. And then the idea of what would it take to kind of put that down, even if it's just for a minute. Like, what would that feel like? And do you feel the need to pick it back up again, or can you leave it there? And visualizing it that way. I love all those ideas that you shared.
Yeah, well, I guess I have been using the Sedona method because I do have people put it in a knapsack and carry it and then put it down when you feel like you're ready, whether it's in the
Yeah.
session or later. Yeah.
Yeah. If you haven't read the book, it's a great book, and that's kind of where it stemmed from. The book's kind of old, but that's where I learned it from ages ago. So what would you for thought management, um, how can a person tell the difference between those things that are like just upsetting or things that could be an indication of something deeper going on, like maybe something where they need to seek out help like that which you offer?
Yeah. Thoughts are very transient in nature. And I don't know what the latest research is today, but there's thousands and thousands that we have at any given time. So thoughts that kind of come and go, like you have the thought, but you're able to move on and or at least put it aside and move on and maybe deal with it later or not, are, ones that are manageable. You can manage it on your own. If you are having thoughts that's interfering with your ability to function, then I mean, and that's a wide spectrum. There's, things that are, come and go and are transient and you can put it aside and continue to function. And then there are thoughts that you are having trouble letting go and it's interfering with your ability to operate, in your family or in your job. Then you have to employ measures, whether it's talking to someone, whether it's seeking professional help from a therapist or a psychologist or some kind of pastor or a person that has more wisdom than you. And then the people that are in the middle, some of the thoughts that are in the middle, doing some of the practices like we talked about a few minutes ago, writing down what the worry is and determining to deal with it later. So it just depends on the extent to which it is debilitating your ability to function in your
Yeah,
day-to-day life.
I like that. How much would you say that your past and your upbringing led you to like the work that you're doing today? Did it play a big
Oh,
part in that?
yeah, I would say a lot because I became a therapist because I went to therapy myself and it worked. So I went to therapy and the therapist I had, Dr. Barbara Cohen, I still go to her from time to time whenever things crop up. It just worked. The methods that she employed, my facing and conquering the thought patterns and conquering some of the experiences that I had worked. And so I spent a lot of time referring friends and family members to her. And then one day I was at work and the thought came to me, you need to be a therapist. And it resonated and it felt right. I had never thought of becoming a therapist. I had never thought of psychology outside of, someday I need to get therapy and I'm going to do it. And so I ran the idea by my husband and three of my closest friends, and each one of them said something to the effect of, I can totally see you doing that. Oh, that I could see you doing that. And they were super supportive. So I applied to school and got in, and here I am.
Love that. And you work on so many different topics in your practice. What do you see the most of?
Well, I'm in Los Angeles, so I see a lot of creative people, like
Yeah.
whether that's musicians or actors, people behind the scenes, like producing, lighting, sound people. I see a lot of women who are working through relational or self-esteem issues. I see a lot of Christians, and I see a lot of people from other faiths because sometimes people want to integrate their faith system and their belief system into their practice.
Yeah.
I have other therapists who work here at Healing the Mind and Spirit, and they all have different populations that they see most of. Like we all work with people who are struggling with depression and anxiety and who are working through their marriages. But some of us work with people on the spectrum, with people who are dealing with financial issues, nutrition issues, things of that nature. So it kind of runs the gamut.
Yeah, I'll bet it does. I love that you do work with boundaries, and I feel like that's kind of like a hot topic that a lot of people could use some advice on. And I tend to give that on my show also, but I'd love to hear like your best advice for implementing and developing good, healthy boundaries.
Yeah, I think most people think of boundaries as something that how much am I going to let in or how much am I going to keep out or put up with? before I put my foot down. But and
Mm.
that's a part of boundaries, but it's a really small part of boundaries. You can start to set boundaries with yourself and with others when you realize that all of your thoughts, words, feelings, behaviors, and resources of time, energy, and money belong to you. And all of so and so's thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and resources of time, energy, and money belong to them. And so when you orient your mind to understand that what that person just said came out of their heart, it came out of their person, it doesn't have anything to do with me. What
Yeah.
that person is stating that they're feeling, it doesn't mean that I have to feel that way too, even if they're demanding that I feel that way. So I think that that's a good starting place. And the
Yeah.
book that I always recommend to my clients for that is it's called Boundaries by Doctors Cloud and Townsend.
Mm.
And they explain boundaries like I've never heard. And I'm a therapist, so I've heard all kinds of theories
I've
on
read that
boundaries,
one too.
all kinds of
It's a good
books,
one.
read all kinds of books on boundaries, but that one does a really good job of capturing and helping people to understand that they are their own person having their own experience, and so are others.
Well, and I think the way that you explained it too sums up the freedom that you get
Mhm.
from instilling boundaries. Not
Yeah.
just, I think when a lot of people think of boundaries, they're thinking like, oh, this is gonna be hard or difficult, or it's gonna take something away from me. But it's such a gift, really, both to
It
you
is.
and to others. So I
Yes,
think
it
that sums
is.
that up beautifully. And
Yeah.
another thing I know that you work with that I see a lot, and I'm always looking for other perspectives on, are sleep issues. What kind of great advice do you have for people that are having trouble sleeping?
Yeah. Well, when I'm working with people that are having trouble sleeping, I first start them with biorhythm therapy, and that's like
Mhm.
understanding the rhythm of your biology.
Yes.
And so we start with going to bed every night at the same time and getting up every morning at the same time. And the reason for that is because our day, the quality of our day really starts the night before.
Yes.
So towards the end of the day, when the sun's, because we're regulated with the sun. That's why people that live in really gloomy areas that do not get a lot of sunshine really struggle with things like depression and sleep issues. But you can struggle with that anywhere. But
Sure.
at the end of the day, when the sun is going down, the hormone melatonin starts to rise in your system and the hormone serotonin starts to go down. And then, 12 hours later, around 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, melatonin goes down and serotonin goes up. So if you can be conscious of that and implement things that will promote the rise of melatonin at night and the rise of serotonin in the morning, you can get yourself on back on the rhythm that you're designed for. And so I promote something called sleep hygiene, which is just like any other kind of hygiene. You're taking care of yourself. And what that looks like behaviorally is when you get home after work, don't have your house lit up like a Christmas tree because you're fighting against the melatonin that wants to rise. So have muted lighting and dim lighting and have before your bedtime, like if your bedtime is 10 o'clock, anywhere from 20 to 45 minutes before your bedtime, implement a routine that you do every night because that routine will signal to your brain, oh, it's time to move out of beta and active waves and into alpha and more relaxed waves. And so some of those things can be having the muted lighting, taking a bath or shower, getting prepped for bed, reading something, having music on, like relaxing music, something that you do on a consistent basis to trigger your brain to produce more of that melatonin. But make sure the home is dimly lit. And by the same token, when you wake up in the morning, introduce light as soon as possible. Like I go into my bathroom and I turn on all three lights. I have, you know, lights in the ceiling. I have lights over the mirror, and then I have a light over. And you could feel it. You could feel yourself waking up. And if it's at all
Yeah.
possible, if you live in an area where the weather is warm at different times of year, go outside. Go outside and get some exercise if you can, even if it's some of the old fashioned things like jumping jacks, doing
Yeah.
push-ups. Do that outside. It will raise the serotonin, because serotonin also promotes not only alertness, but also it's a natural mood lifter.
Yeah.
Take a shower. Like when people are depressed, the last thing they want to do is go outside or take a shower. And those are the first things that you should do, because the negative and positive ions in your water and in your skin interact with one another, and it
Yeah.
causes a lift in mood naturally.
Absolutely. That's why it feels so good to stand under a waterfall.
Yeah. Yeah.
Same with the rain shower heads and that kind of stuff.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely. I love that advice. Thank you so much for all of it. And so where can my listeners find more of you if they want to interact or follow along with what you're doing?
Well, I haven't been asking people to do this on on the podcast that I'm a guest on, but if you go to tracytaris.com, you can join my email subscription list, and then you will receive blogs and just different things that I'm working on and thinking about, things that are coming to my heart. I'm also on Instagram at Tracy Taris, and that's TracyTaris. And my practice is on Instagram at Healing the Mind and Spirit. And so if you live in California, you think you might need some therapy, we offer in-house therapy as well as telehealth services. And you can find us on my website at healingthemindandspirit.com.
Great. I will make sure all of that is in the show notes. And I'm just so thankful that you were here, and I really enjoyed having this conversation with you. Is there any final thoughts or anything else you'd like to add for the listeners before we wrap this up?
Yeah, just, think about what you want for your life. Many times we spend a lot of time thinking about what we don't want, and what we don't want end up showing up because we're unconsciously moving toward what we don't want. Some people say it's an invitation, you're inviting things. So think about, it's a new year. What do you want for this new year? Think of it every day. If you're a praying person, take it in prayer. If you're a journaling person, take it in journaling. If you're an imagination person, imagine what you want and do so every day, so that you will eventually start engaging in behaviors, whether consciously or unconsciously, and moving in that direction. But know that you are beautifully and wonderfully made and loved beyond measure.
Oh, that's a great message. And yes, thoughts become things. So we've got to be really mindful of where we are putting that valuable attention of ours. So thanks again for being here, Tracy. And thank you all for listening. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. If you loved this episode, please share it with a friend or post on social media and tag me so I can personally connect and thank you. Until next time, keep taking bold and brave action steps towards becoming more of who you want to be in this world. You are capable, you are worthy, and you are enough. Keep shining your light.